Okay. Hey, everybody. Can everyone see my screen okay? Just let me know if you can't. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. All right, then I am going to get started. All right, so I'm excited to get to talk to everyone. I'm assuming we've got a mix of different ages here. Some high school, some middle school. Is that right, Mom?
Correct. And maybe one or two college guys.
Okay, perfect. All right, so my name is Virginia. You'll hear Carolyn refer to me as Reed. That's my middle name, which calls me, which she's allowed to call me whatever she wants. She's my mom, so she has that right. So I put together a little presentation on how to organize and study effectively. These are things that have been were very effective for me when I was in school, and then actually skills that I still use now at work. Before I jump in, just a little bit about myself. I live in Philly. I'm the director of finance, HR, and IT for a specialty retail grocery store here. And I have both my undergrad and my graduate degrees, my MBA, from Drexel University, which is in Philly. I moved to Philly for school and just loved it, so I stayed. So these were some skills that were very relevant to me in middle school and high school, but then even more so once I got to college and graduate school. Okay, so I'm going to go through. I'm super relaxed, so if anyone has any questions or anything they want to jump in and ask, feel free, though I do have some time at the end allocated for questions.
Reed, can you share, so everybody here is a student athlete. Can you share that you've had experience helping student athletes learn to study?
Yes, I mean, all through high school and early college, I tutored and helped lots of different student athletes. I also tutored and worked with students with special needs and a lot of students who worked at the same time as well. Personally, all throughout college, from my sophomore year on, I had a professional job that whole time. I was not a student athlete in college, but I did dedicate. I was physically in an office in a professional finance environment 2 to 3 days a week. So I've worked with a lot of student athletes and people with just busy schedules. And then personally for me, staying organized and having a plan was really important because I also, had a very busy schedule, just in a different way, meaning that I was, in the office 24 hours a week, from 9 to 5, 3 days a week, which does take out a big chunk of the day. Okay. All right. So today I want to go through several different things. First, I want to talk about, creating some overall goals. And I want to talk about, starting your semester strong and cascading that down into planning your week and then the actual tactical plan for your week. I want to talk through the 2 most common obstacles people find when they're facing in academics. And those are knowing where to begin and tackling procrastination. I want to talk through both of those. I want to share some tips and a strategy to stay focused. I always think it's important when talking about academia to discuss how to avoid perfectionism and make sure you're doing well and you can keep moving forward. And then I want to talk through how to choose the right and what are your options for a note-taking strategy for different classes and a test studying strategy for different classes. So let's start with determining your overall goals. All right, so the way I have always chosen to look at school is every class is about a lot more than the subject matter you're learning, right? For example, I always hated taking Spanish. I never liked it. It was always my least favorite, and there was nothing I could really do to get excited about the prospect of studying for Spanish or anything like that. So instead, what I try to start my, philosophy with is thinking about what I wanted my future to look like. and who I wanted to be. And I was able to form a clear picture in my head that if I didn't know the specific profession, but that I wanted to be in a professional work environment, and I wanted to be successful, and I wanted to be stable, and I wanted not to be stressed about finding a job. You know, those were all goals I had, and I knew that me performing well in my courses was just a tool to accomplish those goals, right? So there are some classes that I loved and was interested in, and it was much easier to get motivated. And there were others that I not only didn't like, maybe hated. Spanish is my personal example. But I recommend that everyone does take a second to think about what they want themselves, what they want their life to look like in 10 years, right? And, you know, your GPA and graduating from college can either be a tool in your belt to help you get the future that you want in 10 years, or the lack of it could be a hindrance to getting the future that you want in 10 years. So there's a lot of value in spending some time, I don't know if daydreaming is the right word, but thinking about the future that you would like for yourself and the goals that you have, you know, for your family, for yourself, what you think of when you're like, oh yeah, when I'm a together adult, this is what it's going to look like. And then once you've got a picture in your head of that, it's important for me, it helps me stay motivated to think, okay, how is this class or project or assignment going to contribute to or hinder that goal, right? So Spanish, for example, yeah, didn't enjoy it, but I also knew that I needed to do well enough in it so that it didn't hinder me moving forward, right? It didn't hold me back, okay? The other thing that I like to think about when approaching school is, what is this course teaching me besides the subject matter listed? You know, there's a lot of, you know, psychological research around the fact that when you practice a skill, you become much better at it. I'm sure you guys talk about that in your athletics all the time. Well, the same thing is true for academics. The more you practice a specific skill, the easier it becomes. Whether it's different strategies to overcome procrastination, where it's then just naturally easier to overcome it, or study habits or anything like that. So to me, in almost every course, what it's teaching me or taught me are different specific skills that were useful in my later education and now work, whether or not I enjoyed the subject. So I try to go into school and academics with that frame of mind of I'm in control of this situation. It's not I have to go to school. Ugh. It's not my parents want me to do well in school. It's okay, you know what? I determine my future. I am in control of the situation. This is a tool to help me get there. And having that attitude going in makes things easier because you're in control. This is your decision. Okay. The next thing is, you know, a lot of doing well in anything, in my opinion, is having a clear plan and strategy from the beginning. Okay, so to me, each new semester or quarter gives you the opportunity to take a break and create a clear plan for that semester. It's always a fresh start, right? So I really believe in starting your semester strong, right? You live a busy life, so set yourself up for success. The first thing that I always did in every class, every year, was I took all of my syllabuses week 1 of college or week 1 of my high school year and put them all in one calendar. All right. So in college in particular, they tend to give you very specific syllabuses that say, you know, what dates tests are, when certain assignments are due. In high school, they're usually more general. They don't necessarily have the specific dates that projects are due, but they still give you an idea, right? But it's difficult to manage your academics when you're looking at one subject at a time. It is much easier in a holistic approach. Personally, I recommend you're using your phone or computer calendar. If you prefer a paper syllabus, that's great too. But to me, honestly, I'm instinctually looking at my phone anyway. I'm not going to lose my phone. Or I'm really probably not. And I also have my other commitments in my phone, right? I had my work schedule in my phone, my class schedule. I had, social commitments. You could have your athletics in your phone as well. It's very useful to look at your life in one view and not in segmented, siloed views, because of course you can naturally get overwhelmed when you're looking at things siloed and you think, oh shoot, oh, am I forgetting something? Am I forgetting something? Am I forgetting something? And when that's in your mind, it's difficult, to get moving. So I always recommend you start your semester strong, create one space. I recommend your phone or your computer to put in all of your assignments and tests, right? So if it says you're going to have a test week 5, you can just go ahead and put it in there for that course. And then every time I get a new assignment, instead of putting it on in my paper agenda, which that could work too, but for me, my central tracker was my phone, I would put it in there immediately so that I didn't have to remember it, right? There was not a burden on me to remember things. So my focus is on what I actually need to think about, right? And then you can set appropriate alerts and reminders for upcoming deadlines on all of the events in your phone, right? So if you make every assignment an event on your calendar and set an alert 24 hours before, 48 hours before, it makes it much easier not to miss an upcoming deadline. On that same kind of theory, right? Just like you want to go into your semester with a little bit of a plan, you really want to plan your week when it comes to academics. Again, you can be as in control of school as you want, right? School can either happen to you or you can happen to school. And your attitude about that is really going to determine some of your success, right? So if you just make the decision that you're going to start every week with a plan, you're not going to let your week happen to you, you're going to control your outcome, you're already doing better than a lot of your peers, right? So what I would do at the start of each week is I would look at my centralized calendar for what I need to do for the week, understand my full workload, understand what days I have to go to the office, or, when I was in high school, I played water polo. So what days I had practice, what days I had double practice, make sure I knew what my week looked like in whole, and then break things up, right? So that I had goals for each day, right? I knew that I wanted Monday to get these 3 things done. Tuesday, I need to get these 3 things done. Wednesday, I wasn't going to get anything done because I was super busy with non-school stuff, and that's okay. Thursday, I would get these things done, that kind of strategy. And I would often use that strategy to even plan myself a day off, right? Or a day where I was only doing fun things, right? Like, okay, if I get these things done on Thursday and Friday, then that means on Saturday, I've got nothing to do but fun things. And that can be a good motivator. So create a plan for your week, because it's only as overwhelming as you choose to let it be. If you can make the decision to really stay organized and create a clear plan. With that, it's important to think about what your priorities are, right? So what's the most important work that needs to get done, right? If, say, in a given week, you've got 3 tests, right? You want to make sure, obviously, you'd like to do well on all of them, right? But it is important to have some moment of reflection and think, you know what? I know the material for 2 of these tests pretty well, but this 3rd test, I'm not ready for it all. I need to make sure that I allocate more time for that. And then you want to get a little bit tactical about it, right? So the idea is you're building a set of tools, right? So every week you're going into the week and creating a success plan for yourself, whether it's school or honestly anything. And use the system that works for you. So for me, what I did is I would look at my overarching week on my phone calendar and I would move items to specific days, right? For some people, it may be easier to make a note in their phone or on a piece of paper, just listing what needs to get accomplished each day and checking them off the list, right? Or on paper, as long as you're sure you're not going to lose it, right? But what what's helpful is if on Monday you're making the decision of what you're going to get done Monday, Tuesday, the whole week, planned out on paper, and then all you have to do each day is execute. It's a lot easier to be in control or feel like you aren't missing something and avoid panic, right? For me, at school, people can be very competitive. It can be a stressful and competitive environment. And if you've got a plan, it's not always necessary to be stressed, right? Like, it is going to be okay. Just need to plan it out, so you can attack the day instead of, oh, you know what? Shoot, I really need to study. I'm stressed about the math test because whoever was talking about that, but then I also have this science project. Oh, and there's that book report due in 3 weeks that I really probably should get started on. So instead of taking that approach when you sit down to study of, I've got 8 things I need to do, they all sound awful, I'm just not going to get through it, taking the approach of, okay, this is my week, this is the amount of time I have, and this is what I'm going to do each day, so that Tuesday when you sit down to study, you can pull out your list and say, okay, these are the 4 things I have to get done. And then when you get them done, celebrate that, right? That was successful, good, great, go do something relaxing and move on. So the goal is definitely to split up your work so you can balance your schedule with your other needs, whether it's sports, whether it's friends, whether it's work, whether it's spending time with your family, whatever it is. Yeah, so balance is really important, because I would never teach anything that was focused 100% on, you should spend all your time on school, or you should spend all your time on athletics, or all your time on your friends. Balancing these things is what's going to make you successful. And to me, in my opinion, one of the biggest tools that can help you do that is creating a tactical plan for your week. So your week's not happening to you, you're happening to your week. So most research identifies 2 major obstacles that hinder most students' success in school. The first is a sense of feeling overwhelmed or not knowing where to begin. You could be overwhelmed either with the quantity of work or with the difficulty of the work. Either way, it's a sense of feeling overwhelmed and like not knowing how to start. The other, which ties into the first one well, is procrastination. Not wanting to and not knowing how to. Good organization can help overcome both these obstacles, but I'm going to go into some other ways that you can overcome either of these obstacles. I just want to note that intelligence is really not considered one of the biggest obstacles at all. And to me, that's empowering to know, because no one is the smartest at every subject, and you shouldn't be, right? But you can still be successful in every subject if you put in some effort and you kind of address things with a bit of a plan. So I just really want to point that out, that I think a lot, especially for me, a lot of people growing up, and my high school was a very competitive environment. There was a lot of discussion of, oh, you get good grades, you're so smart, or you're lucky, you're so intelligent, it comes easy. That has very little to do with it. Doing well in school is a choice that you get to choose to make if you want to. And I strongly believe that. Now, that's not to say some subjects are going to come easier to some people than others. Of course they are, right? Some subjects are going to be harder for you than others, but either way, you can get through it. But yeah, almost all research notes overwhelmedness or not knowing where to begin, and procrastination is the biggest obstacles to students being successful in school. Very rarely is intelligence mentioned. I just want to share that. So first, let's talk about being overwhelmed. All right, so school is just one segment, but there are lots of segments of life that is overwhelming. And for most people, how you respond is your decision, especially for something like school. How you respond to being overwhelmed by it is your decision. It does take a lot of work and effort and strength to focus when you're overwhelmed, right? It's very difficult to think about studying or think about what you have to do or think about really anything productive when you're feeling overwhelmed, right? So what you need is a plan. A lot of what I talked about leading up to this were strategies to avoid getting to the point where you're overwhelmed because you have a plan going in. Let's say you didn't do them, you had a crazy Monday, didn't happen, no big deal. You're sitting there Tuesday, you know of a ton of stuff that needs to get done by Wednesday. You're so overwhelmed, you might as well just watch TV for another half an hour because what's the point? What difference is it even going to make? So when you feel like that, what I suggest is the first thing you say is, do I have a list of everything that needs to get done this week? Or is it just in my head? Because in your head and on paper or on phone or in a Word document is not the same thing. In your head is not enough, right? Because that's just creating the sense of overwhelm. So when I'm overwhelmed, the very first thing I like to do is create a list of everything that I need to get done. All right. Sometimes creating the list can be a little stressful to look at, but that's okay. You create the list, you get it on paper instead of in your head. All right. And then you're going to look at it and say, okay, what is the half, the 50% of it, that is most important? If I have 10 items on my list, I'm going to identify 5 that are most important. It's never more than 50%. If I've got 20 items on my list, I'm going to identify 10 that are most important. Okay, and I'm determining importance in the academic setting as what's due first, what's worth the most school-wise, what if it's tests, what is your weakest and needs some extra studying and attention, right? That's going to be what's most important. So you're choosing those 10, and then before you even look at the other half, the one that aren't as important, you're going to schedule on your list of each day the most important 10. You're not going to start from the top of the list and start scheduling. Nope, you're always going to start with what's most important. Okay, there's a kind of analogy, there's an example that's in a lot of literature about like a glass container. And if, let's say, you've got sand, stones, and large rocks, and your large rocks are what's most important to you, your stones are medium important, and the sand is just little filler things that kind of have to get done. If you pour all the sand into the jar first, there's not going to be any room for the stones or the rocks. But if you put the big rocks in first and then fill in with the sand, then it can all fit in the same jar, right? That's to say, if you're starting assigning things that are not as important first to days, you're not going to be able to prioritize what's more important. So make your list, take the number of items, divide that by 2. If I have 20 items, 10, pick my 10 most important, my 50% most important, okay? And then commit to what days you're going to do those and start. Okay, now there's a slide on how to start as well, but this is the first step, and when you do it, you do feel a sense of calm. Just like athletics, every time you practice this, it gets easier and you get stronger at it. Learned mental skills, use just as much muscle reflex and training as learned physical skills. The other big hindrance or obstacle is procrastination, right? Everyone loves to procrastinate. So there is a lesson, and it's called Eat That Frog. I didn't come up with that terminology, but eat that frog. And what that means is that your frog, quote unquote, is your most important piece of work, the thing you most urgently need to do, or the one that's going to have the most impact on your learning or your grades. Every day, when you look at your list of 10 things or 5 things that you need to get done, there's one that's most important, right? There's the one that is a big impact, okay? There's also things that are like a 10-minute assignment that you can knock out, right? Most people recommend, and I agree, that you start with your frog. You start with your most important piece of work, okay? You don't start with the easy assignment. I recommend not starting with the easy assignment to just get it out of the way. I really recommend you start with your frog for a couple reasons. One, you're going to be your sharpest and your most focused when you start studying or start schoolwork. It is going to go downhill from there. All right. So you should put your best mental energy with your most important task. Two, when you complete it, you will feel a sense of accomplishment and a sense of, an easing of your overwhelmedness. You'll feel calmer, right? Whereas if you get your quick 10-minute assignment done, it'll be nice to cross off the list, but you'll still feel all of the work that you have to do. So when you start with your frog, quote unquote, or your most important thing, you're really training yourself to tackle problems head on and avoid procrastination. Whether those are academic problems, work problems, any problems, it's a skill that you're teaching yourself by making the choice and the decision to say, okay, it's my plan for the day, and this is the most important thing on it. I'm going to start with that first. And that's a powerful thing to do. And making the decision to start with what's most important is going to avoid you being in situations where you're writing your final essay the night before, because you know that's what's most important. You would have known it all week, you would have created the plan, and you can start working on that throughout the week because that's your frog, right? Instead of doing all the little assignments that are also due Friday. But you know what? It's nice to just get something off the list. So strongly recommend to start with your frog. There's actually a book entitled Eat That Frog that I recommend to anyone if they struggle with procrastination, because it's got a lot more detail on this, and it's something that I actually have listened to multiple times on audiobook, different years of my life, because it's a good reminder. So if procrastination in general is something that for you is an issue, which would make you very normal, Eat That Frog is a great book. And if you listen to it, it's only about like a 45-minute to an hour listen on audiobook. It's not a big book. So I recommend that. So sticking on procrastination, you have chosen your frog. You've selected it, right? In this example, I'm going to say that my frog is studying for a history test. All right, that's what's most important. So I'm going to take a couple steps. I've chosen it. I know, so here's where I'm at. It's Monday. I know I have 4 things to do today, and I know that studying for the history test is the most important. So I'm going to do that first. The first step is I'm going to make sure that I've got all my materials set up around me that I'm going to need for this task, right? I don't want to be looking for things. I'm going to spend a couple minutes getting ready. I'm going to make sure I have in this example, my class notes, my books, my computer charger, water, that I'm set up, that I'm not going to have to get up for the next half an hour, that I can focus on this task, right? Because when you get up or you get distracted, it's difficult to refocus. So why make things harder on yourself? Okay. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to commit to starting, right? So often people procrastinate because starting just seems very painful, right? So what a lot of people do and what I do is I set a timer on my phone for half an hour. Half an hour is not that long. And I commit to just starting on my hardest thing for the next half an hour, okay? After half an hour, you can be in one of 2 places, right? Often, you're on a roll, you only have half an hour left, you only have 20 minutes left, 40 minutes left. You're like, you know what, I'm on a roll, let me just keep going, right? So you just keep moving through. If you're getting frustrated, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You can set a timer for a 15-minute break, take your break, and then come back to the table, right? But the whole theme of this is that you're creating your goals in terms of time. You're not creating your goals in terms of your expectations of how much you're going to get done, right? So I'm not saying, oh, I'm going to work on this history studying until I'm done with lesson 1 or chapter 1. I know it's a couple chapters on the test. I can't take a break until I get through the Renaissance period. that's a hard way to talk to yourself, right? Instead of saying, you know what, I am going to commit to studying for half an hour. If I get through the Renaissance period, that's great. If I don't, then I'm just going to have to then that's okay. I'm going to take my break and I'm going to come back to it. So that kind of mentality going into something of it's half an hour, this is the most important, I've got everything I need for half an hour to work on this, prevents you from feeling trapped or resentful of your work as you're doing it, which both those feelings can create more procrastination. All right, shifting a little bit from the two biggest obstacles that can be challenges and how to overcome them, I want to shift to some things that can help you move on even above that, right? So the first that I'm going to talk about is staying focused. And these are just a couple of tips to help yourself, right? I'm a big believer in, you know what? Things are hard enough as it is, might as well make it a little easier on myself, right? So if there's some things I can do that are going to make me easily more successful at something, let me do them. So yeah, staying focused can be hard for anybody. First, you want to create the appropriate environment for you to work in. Your bed is not the appropriate environment to work in, right? It is difficult to stay focused when you're on your bed, when you're on your couch, right? I know that not everyone has a dedicated desk space. That's okay. You can do the best you can in finding a quiet, calm, relatively clean work surface and chair to work on. And it's the best you can, right? But putting that effort into saying, okay, this is my workspace, this is what I'm going to study, is setting you off on the right foot, and really does have an impact on your mental approach to things and your physical ability to stay focused, right? If you're laying on your couch, if the TV's on, if there's multiple people in the room, it's difficult. There's no denying it's difficult. So let's make it a little easier on yourself and create the appropriate environment. And again, you're in control. You are choosing to make the right environment for you to be successful, and you're choosing to stay focused. You're controlling the situation. It's not controlling you. We've talked about this a lot of times, but have a clear list of what you want to get accomplished. Next, setting timers. So yeah, they're a great tool to get through procrastination. They're also a really great tool to keep you on track throughout your day or throughout your time you have allocated to studying, right? So making sure you have time goals and making sure that you're working, right? So for example, one problem or challenge that people have staying focused is being distracted by texts, calls, and social media. I've got that problem at work. I'm getting texts and stuff. So one thing I do is if I've got something I need to accomplish, I set a timer and I put my phone on silent, flipped over for half an hour. And it is shocking the amount you can get done in half an hour when you're not flipping over your phone to see who's texting you. It is difficult, but just like everything else, the more you do it, the more you flex that muscle and it becomes much easier. Right? So that's another way timers can help you, is you're saying, you know what, I'm not going to pay attention to distractions for half an hour. And that's okay. I might miss some texts. It's okay. I'm going to get this done. And then I'm going to have a 10-minute break to catch up on everything. And then I'm going to continue working. Right? I think the next thing is it's important to, celebrate or appreciate your victories. Right? Getting everything done on your list for the day is an excellent accomplishment, right? And you should feel good about that, right? On Monday, or Sunday, or whenever it is, creating a plan for your week, so you're going into your week with a plan, that's a big accomplishment, and you should feel good about it, right? So feeling good and, saying kind things, not necessarily to yourself, but knowing that you're on track is important. You don't have to feel overwhelmed, or you don't have to be, oh, I was up till 2 studying to prove you're doing a good job. It's just not necessary. Sometimes you have to, but a lot of times you don't. So it's important to celebrate your victories because that fuels you moving forward. All of these things are little things, but they make staying focused a lot easier. The next thing I want to talk about, which I always talk about in stuff like this, is avoiding perfectionism, all right? Many students struggle with perfectionism. Many people struggle with perfectionism, right? And perfectionism is the opposite of helpful in most school environments, right? If you're doing like a dissertation or you're getting your doctorate or you're really detailed focused on something, that is a different environment. I mean in high school, middle school, college, grad school, standard grad school. Perfectionism is not helpful. It leads to extra stress, procrastination, negative self-talk, and an unbalanced life. All right. There is no need to be perfect to do well. I never had perfect grades. I had good grades and I did well. Right. So I want you to keep that in mind. And it's very difficult to be perfect in every subject. Right. Often if you're focusing on being perfect on an assignment, it sacrifices something else, right? It either sacrifices one of your other subjects that you need to focus on, or it sacrifices your sleep, your time spent with your family, your time spent with your friends, and it is important to have balance, right? So I always want to point that out, when I'm going through something like this. It's difficult to remember, but very important. Right? Because doing well is the combination of pushing yourself, getting better, learning, keeping a balanced perspective of school, and trying hard, right? It's not being perfect. There is a difference. Always want to point that out. And, remember, the point is to learn, not to be perfect. There's a clear difference, and you often aren't learning unless you're making some mistakes, right? So, but just like in the previous one where I told you it's important to, celebrate your studying victories. It's also important to, when you make a mistake, like let's say you don't create a schedule, you miss some assignments. Okay, it happened. You can't beat yourself up about it now. Let's create a plan to how we're going to address that, how we're going to fix that moving forward. All right. So the last two slides I have here are the note-taking strategy and the test-taking strategy, or test studying strategy. And for me, they kind of go hand in hand, right? And I think it's less about what's your note-taking strategy as a person. It's what note-taking strategy goes well with this class. Different classes, and then in college, different courses require a different level of note-taking. Okay, so let me give some examples, right? Some classes are very interactive. There's not a bunch of note-taking. Some are lecture-based, and there's a lot of note-taking. Some are lecture-based, but the professor provides slides online, right? There are multiple different ways, right? But what's important is that I really try not to say, this is how I take notes, let me apply it to every class. Because that's just not fair. Classes are different. It's important to be adaptive to the different courses. So one of my goals in the first week I'm in a class, one is to get all my syllabuses and assignments in the same calendar. But then two, to assess the class and create a plan for my note-taking. All right, so if I'm seeing that it's lecture-based, I'm going to start and figure out, and start either an outline format or a bullet point format, or a free verse format of taking notes, whatever, seems organized to you and you're comfortable with. If it seems like, they post the slides online and go through them in class, then I'm going to make sure that I either print or have the slides downloaded on my computer so I can just add my notes on there, right? Whatever is needed. So that's a lot has to do with what type of lecturing there is, and is there a textbook with required reading? All right, because the secondary part of note-taking is how it lends to studying for a test, right? Going into your test, usually your biggest tools are a book, the textbook, if there is one, your notes from the textbook reading and class, any sort of study guide or practice test that the teacher gives you, right? And what you remember in your head. And what you remember in your head is the least reliable of those 4 options. So the note taking is important because then it makes it easier later. It's also very difficult for people to read textbooks, right? Especially the night before a test. So if the textbook is a big resource and it does have a lot of the information, then what's going to be important is that that is broken up. And you're not saying the night before, oh, you know what, I'm just going to skim through the textbook and review that way. It's very ineffective. It's going to be much more effective to skim through your own words, your own notes, because you pick them up much quicker. There's a remembrance once you reread them of writing it or typing it. So that's important to know. The last thing I just want to touch on is using a computer for note taking. So in college, this is clearly an option in most schools. In high school, it's probably not an option. It wasn't when I was in high school, but things change. And there are pros and cons to using a computer, right? So a notebook, always good, right? And some of the reasons why is you are not distracted. You're not getting emails, you're not tempted, you don't go to look at other things, you can just use a notebook. So that is always a good option if you have it. If you have a computer and you're allowed to use it, like in a college environment, there's just some things you have to do to, again, set yourself up for success. Because using a computer to make notes can be very helpful. One, you can easily organize things, right? You can edit it, you can clean it up, you can bold things, you can change the organization of things. So you can create a really good study tool out of your typed notes, right? And then additionally, you can search for key phrases and key words in Word documents instead of having to skim through pages of notes. So it can be a real positive, but if you're going to use a computer for note taking, it's very important that you have a plan on how you're going to organize your documents, that you close and commit to keeping closed web browsers and emails and IM and chat. And if you get your like text through your phone, through your computer, that you make the decision to close that and be present, right? Because when you're using a notebook, you don't have to make that decision, but when you're using a computer, you do, right? So if you are able to do all those things, then computer's great. If not, there is nothing wrong with being the person in the class who chooses not to use a computer, who chooses to use a notebook, because you know it's going to make you more, it's easier for you, makes you more successful. So test studying strategy is very similar, all right? So with this, you want to figure out what's going to work for this course, not this is how I study for tests, right? You want to be adaptive. And again, you want to go into everything with a plan, but studying for a test with a plan. So what I like to do is determine what key areas or chapters I know need to be reviewed. Usually this is on a study guide, or the teacher will go through it like the week before. And then I always start with my weakest section. Similar to the frog concept, right? It's the same concept, right? You're going to be your freshest. You're going to absorb the most information at the beginning. So you should start with your weakest section, what you need to learn the most on. Then you're going to go section by section. You're not going to go type of material, right? So sometimes people say, you know what? I'm going to review all my class notes, and then I'm going to review the teacher's study guide, and then I'm going to review the textbook, right? That's fine. You're still getting through it, but it's unnecessary, right? It's inefficient. You could be learning quicker, and the way to do that is by section, right? So chapter, let's go back to the Renaissance example for the history test. So instead of saying, you know what, I'm gonna go through all the chapters I need to in the textbook, and then my class notes, and then the study guide, instead, I'm gonna do Renaissance for all 3 of my tools, and then my next section for all 3 of the tools, right? That's gonna be the most efficient way, and it's easiest for your mind to learn by section of material, not by type of material, because your mind doesn't really care whether it's from the textbook or from the notes or the study guide. It cares about the section you're learning. And the last thing I just want to point out is that study aren't for everyone. Okay, so some people do well reviewing with their friends before a test, right? And for some people, that doesn't work. And there is nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I actually study better alone. Let me focus on that. There's also nothing wrong with saying, I study better with a partner. Let me focus on that. I encourage everyone to try to be a little reflective when thinking back on what tests you did well on, what tests you didn't do well on, because aside from the material, you're learning how you study and what worked for you and what didn't work for you, all right? And that is invaluable information. And recognizing it, learning from it, and adapting in the future are just generally very helpful skills, but is particularly helpful when it comes to studying and organizing your schoolwork. Those were the things that I had set to talk about, but I am open if anyone has any specific questions.
They often don't ask many questions.
Okay, well, cool.
I have one question, actually.
Awesome.
Who was the author of the Eat That Frog book?
That's a great question. Let me pull it up for you right now.
I'm gonna look too.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. Brian Tracy. And it's cool because it's Eat That Frog, and then, oh, it's very dark. Let me turn on the light. When did that happen? Sorry, guys. I thought it was lighter when I started. So it's Eat That Frog, and it's 21 great ways to stop procrastinating and get things done in less time. And it's cool because each chapter is a strategy of those 21 different ways.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Cool. All right. Thank you, guys.
Ms. Sheetz?
Yeah.
Oh, would it be possible to share this PowerPoint? I found it really helpful. I'd love to go over it again.
Yeah, sure. I'll send it to one, and she can send it out. No problem.
And I
Cool.
recorded,
That was
guys.
helpful.
I recorded it, so I'll post it to YouTube privately, and the people who attended can have a copy of the link.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad I helped.
That was awesome, Reed.
No problem.
Anybody else? All right, guys, can you break, Chrissy? Go, bud. Hands in. Go, Chrissy.
Prep on me. Prep on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Good night. Love you guys.
Thank you.